Hello everyone, KTChamberlain here. As I was marathon watching the original Star Wars trilogy, I had a revelation that really blew my mind. There is an Old Testament Bible verse that seems to describe the Star Wars franchise of today to a T. Now, I know what you're thinking. What passage in the Holy Bible could possibly sum up the Star Wars franchise? The answer? Daniel chapter 2, verses 31 to 43.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
By the way, for the purposes of this video, I'll be reciting from the New International Version of the Bible. You looked, O king, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were broken to pieces at the same time and became like chaff on a threshing floor in summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. You, O king, are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds of the air. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. After you, another kingdom will rise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron. For iron breaks and smashes everything, and as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. Now for some context. In this passage, King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon had a dream of the statue and asked the Israelite Daniel if he could interpret this dream, much like how Joseph interpreted the Pharaoh's dream in the book of Genesis. Daniel tells the king that he is the head of gold in the statue, and that the glory of the Babylonian Empire is symbolized in that gold head. After his death, another king and kingdom would take his place, and that king was Cyrus the Great with the Persian Empire. The kingdom after that was the Grecian Empire, founded by Alexander the Great. The kingdom after that was the Roman Empire, and the last kingdom was basically a bunch of divided kingdoms. Now you're probably wondering, what does this Bible passage have to do with a space opera like Star Wars? Well, it's fair to say that the symbolism of that statue can be applied to the Star Wars franchise in general today. When Star Wars premiered on May 25th, 1977, it was a huge box office success that captivated audiences young and old. George Lucas became wealthy overnight, and it spawned a pop cultural phenomenon akin to Star Trek. Two more successful sequels would follow in 1980's The Empire Strikes Back and 1983's Return of the Jedi. The original Star Wars trilogy was without a doubt the gold of the statue. It was the gold standard of the franchise. In 1997, in preparation for the 20th anniversary of the first Star Wars movie, George Lucas announced a theatrical re-release of the trilogy with added scenes and revamped effects, courtesy of Industrial Light and Magic. The reception was mixed at best, and that's putting it generously. Many of the added scenes and updated effects just stuck out like a sore thumb, and it infuriated audiences to see George Lucas tampering with his own films, similar to Charlie Chaplin tampering with his own films, only worse. Needless to say, the special edition sparked controversy, even with each home video re-release. But why did it spark so much controversy to begin with? Well, imagine this. Imagine you're a child and you see something made of solid gold for the very first time in a museum. It's dazzling, it's beautiful, and from then on, you rarely see it because museum displays sometimes come and go, almost like movies in a theater. Now imagine years later, that golden work of art is announced to return for you to see in a museum. You go to that museum, you see that object on display, but instead of that golden object, you're shown the same thing, only it's made of silver. Silver is valuable and useful in its own right, yes, but it's not what you came for in the first place. So you are likely to feel bamboozled, disappointed, and even angry because you think to yourself, why did the artist have to lower the value of his own masterpiece? If the original trilogy was that golden object that captivated your imagination, then the special edition trilogy of 1997 was the silver version of that. Valuable, just not as valuable as the original trilogy, especially since they're so hard to come by on modern home video releases like DVD or Blu-ray. Prior to 1999, a new Star Wars trilogy was announced. It was to tell the story of how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. In 1999, Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace premiered. While it may have done well at the box office, it got flack. And like the changes in the special editions, it sparked controversy. We as fans kept trying to rationalize ourselves that it was still good, that it could get better with Episodes 2 and 3. But 2002, Attack of the Clones comes out. In some ways, it was better than Episode 1, and in other ways, it was worse than Episode 1. 2005 comes along, and Revenge of the Sith had the same kind of reception as the first two. Did well at the box office, but sparked outrage and controversy, and was seen as a joke because of the bad decisions Lucas made. Harry S. Plinkett of Red Letter Media did lengthy reviews on all three films talking about the problems and stupidity each film presented, not just as Star Wars movies, but as movies in general. Tons of internet reviewers have done video essays talking about its failings to deliver on our expectations, so I won't go into any of that here. You've got YouTube and Red Letter Media for that. With the prequel trilogy, the franchise dropped from silver to bronze. We saw the writing on the wall in that George Lucas was out of touch with his own creation. We all thought, maybe, if it was free of him, it could flourish once again like a Star Wars renaissance. In 2012, George Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney for $4 billion. To us, this had the potential to be great. Side note, when I first went to Disneyland in 1996 for my 7th birthday and went on Star Tours, I thought Star Wars was already under the Disney name. I guess I was off by 16 years. So when I heard the news, I really wasn't that surprised at all. My earliest memory with Star Wars was the scene where Chewbacca tries to fix C-3PO, but has his head on backwards. Anyway, back on topic. With Disney acquiring Star Wars, production began on a sequel trilogy to take place after Return of the Jedi. There was a series of books that expanded on the canon of the original Star Wars trilogy after Return of the Jedi, for better or for worse. These books are known as the Expanded Universe of Star Wars. However, Disney made the controversial decision to declare them all null and void and decided to start from scratch. This was a ballsy decision to say the least, but sadly, this would come back to bite them in the ass. More on that in a bit. Director J.J. Abrams was to direct the first movie in this new trilogy, Star Wars: The Force Awakens, released in December of 2015. While it performed very well financially at the box office, the fan reception was mixed at best. While it improved on some of the problems people had with the prequels, like the excess of CGI and lack of practical effects and sets, it still borrowed way too much from Star Wars: A New Hope, pretty much beat for beat, and it showed. These issues were glaring, but we were willing to stomach them if the build-up they established had good payoff in the latter two films, especially if the latter two films borrowed less and less from the original trilogy. After the success of The Force Awakens, J.J. Abrams announced that he wasn't going to direct the second new film and would live to regret that decision. So Kathleen Kennedy, the new head of Lucasfilm under Disney, assigned director Rian Johnson to direct Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Its reception was pretty negative from the fans, and it was the first Star Wars movie to not do well in China. All plans they had for the story of this new trilogy were essentially scrapped by Rian Johnson, and Kathleen Kennedy did nothing. The characters were written poorly, the story was piss poor, the action was mediocre, and for the first time people began to second-guess their thoughts on the prequel trilogy as if it was somehow not as bad as they used to say it was. That alone spoke volumes of how bad the backlash was on The Last Jedi. After that, J.J. Abrams returned to direct the third and final installment, The Rise of Skywalker. It was his attempt to try and rectify the mess Rian Johnson caused, but the sequel trilogy was already beyond repair. It shot itself in the foot. It was too late. It could not be saved. Not even Ian McDiarmid reprising Palpatine could save it. Rise of Skywalker made even dumber decisions and took dumber liberties with the established lore of the original trilogy. It really was beyond repair, and the reputation of the Star Wars franchise lost more credibility than it did before. Since Rise of Skywalker, J.J. Abrams has been called by the fandom Jar Jar Abrams. That has to be the worst curse you could visit on a Star Wars nerd. It's like being given the Bibulus Award.
So long, Jar Jar. We hardly knew you before you were viciously murdered by an actual firing squad in an official Star Wars game, for real.
The franchise sank from bronze to iron. Iron may be stronger and more useful than bronze, but it requires a higher temperature to work with, and it rusts in oxygen. It seemed to us that it has rusted. Now this brings us to the final low point, the side stories. Rogue One may have done well, but overall it was average at best. And Solo, a Star Wars story, was the first Star Wars film to not, I repeat, not earn back its money at the box office. Damn. This is the partly iron and partly baked clay of this statue's symbolism, folks. Rogue One was the partly iron and was strong, but Solo, a Star Wars story, was the partly baked clay and was thus brittle. Its failure at the box office, failure in the writing, and so forth have essentially divided the fan base, and it hasn't commanded the same level of credibility as it did between 1977 and 1997. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was not well received when it opened at Disneyland and Disney World, even though the franchise is one of Disney's top 3 moneymakers. Why? I would argue mainly it's because it rode on the coattails of the sequel trilogy, not the original trilogy. Bad move, Disney. Before The Last Jedi premiered, I had a dream of 2 people dueling with lightsabers. But one of the lightsaber blades broke, which is impossible, both in the lore and from a scientific standpoint. I realized what the dream meant. It meant that The Last Jedi would do the impossible in dividing the fan base in such a way that was considered impossible. Now, are the prequels that bad? No. There is some good to be found in the prequel trilogy, I will give it that. And people like the Nostalgia Critic have pointed out the positives. But they are still stupid movies. It's like finding the practical value of bronze itself. But the thing about bronze is that it's an alloy made up of 90% copper and 10% tin. However, even in the Bronze Age, there was a variant of bronze that used arsenic instead of tin. But arsenic bronze can shorten your life because of, well, you know, how deadly arsenic is to the human body. Now, are the sequels that bad? No. There is good to be found in the sequel trilogy, just not as much as the films progressed, and they're still stupid movies. Iron does have practical value, but is it something you'd want to implement in the golden work of art analogy I made about the original trilogy? No. Fans that debate over which is better, the prequels or the sequels, are like the teenagers in Family Guy that argue over which age was superior, the Bronze Age or the Iron Age.
Dude, the Bronze Age was so much cooler than the Iron Age. Dude, the Iron Age could kick the Bronze Age's butt any day of the week. Could not. Could too. Could not.
Both metals and both ages have their merits. The Bronze Age gave us the pyramids, the Code of Hammurabi, the Trojan War, writing, and a world that was globalized for its time up until it collapsed around 1150 BC. The Iron Age gave us democracy, republic, monotheistic religions, the Bible, the Library of Alexandria, and many like to argue that we're still living in the Iron Age because of how widespread iron is, especially in steelworks. The prequels gave us the Clone Wars series, one 2D by Genndy Tartakovsky and the other 3D. The sequel trilogy gave us Rogue One and The Mandalorian. Both metals and both trilogies have their value, their merit, their ups and downs, but in the end, you're just arguing over metals that are worth less than gold and silver, so what's the point? They're both lesser. With the prequels and the sequels, you're arguing over trilogies that are worth less than the original Star Wars trilogy. Hell, they're worth even less than the special editions, the silver standard of Star Wars, if you will. So that's where I stand on that debate. Make of that what you will. Out of all the biblical symbolism to be seen in Star Wars, I'm surprised how this one snuck up on the franchise on a meta level. I mean, wow. I love Star Wars. It'll always hold a special place in my heart, but I will never bring myself to value the lesser trilogies the way I do the original. Not all that glitters is gold, folks. I hope you enjoyed this little video essay I whipped up in such a short amount of time, and special thanks to Mike Bemis for whipping up the video's thumbnail and this image of C-3PO matching Nebuchadnezzar's statue in the Bible. This is KTChamberlain. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you.